On the Golden Coast of Australia, two Canadian tourists, Greg and Heather, arrive at Tucker's Experience, a cage diving tour that offers close encounters with sharks, which they stumbled upon online. Nearby, a vendor named Dave, who turns out to be a friend of Tucker, asks if they had booked in advance.
Didn't book, eh? Thought we'd just try our luck.
Moments later, Tucker himself shows up. After exchanging names, Tucker casually asks them if they're a couple. Heather quickly clarifies that they're not, explaining that they're simply staying at a nearby hostel with some friends. She adds that their friends left for SeaWorld before they woke up, so they came here instead.
I guess no one even knows you guys are here then.
Suspicious of the question, Heather asks why.
I just want to make sure your last will and testament's in order. We will be swimming sharks after all.
Once on the boat, Tucker entertains his customers with a personal story, how he had a near-death experience with a shark while surfing at the age of 7.
Wasn't there someone watching you?
Let's just say I used to spend a lot of time on my own.
Soon after, Tucker begins throwing chum into the water to attract sharks. Heather grows visibly uneasy, especially after hearing about Tucker's traumatic past. Sensing her discomfort, Tucker sings the Baby Shark song in a playful attempt to lighten the mood. It works. They are then lowered into the water inside a diving cage. At first, Heather panics, but Greg gently offers his hand. Calmed by his support, she begins to enjoy the experience, mesmerized by the majestic creatures around them. Back on the boat, Heather is visibly happy after the dive, but her smile fades in an instant when Tucker plunges a knife into Greg.
Welcome aboard.
The next morning, not far from the same coastline, an American woman named Zephyr is surfing joyfully, catching waves in the early sun. Later, she visits a local supermarket. At the checkout counter, she notices a young man asking the cashier for jumper cables, only to be told they're out of stock. The man turns to Zephyr and asks her if she has any. She brushes him off coldly. Outside, Zephyr empties her drink and retrieves a hidden box of ice cream from inside the Slurpee. As she heads back to her van, she's confronted by the same man from the store. He bluntly threatens to report her to the shopkeeper unless she gives him a ride to his car, supposedly parked 10 blocks away. Reluctantly, she agrees. During the drive, the man introduces himself as Moses, saying he works in real estate. He casually asks if she prefers the window or aisle seat, commenting that window seat people tend to be more reserved.
Get major window vibes. Shut the fuck up. Yep.
Shortly after, Zephyr stops in front of a high-rise building where Moses' car is parked. Zephyr notices a surfboard in the back of his car.
Where you been surfing?
Oh, snapper, mostly.
The two bond over their shared love for surfing. Moses admits that even if she hadn't helped him, he wouldn't have told the cashier about her shoplifting.
No, yeah, I probably shouldn't have judged a book by its cover.
Moses heads to his car and thanks her for the ride. After a brief, awkward silence, Zephyr breaks it by asking if he's a fan of Credence. Moses nods. Yet another thing they have in common. That night, they sleep together in her van, which is parked outside Moses' house. Later, Moses learns about Zephyr's odd little obsession. She eats 9 bread rolls every single day.
What can I say? The waves were all time and bread rolls are cheap.
Curious, Moses asks how she got into surfing.
Because there was nothing for me on land.
Early the next morning, Moses heads inside his house to prepare an elaborate breakfast for the two of them. But when he returns, he finds the van gone. Meanwhile, Zephyr drives to the beach and parks near the shoreline. She digs around for her fin key, only to remember that Moses had tossed it away. She heads over to a nearby truck to ask for a spare.
Hey, if you can hear me, I'm just looking for a fin key. Jesus.
Just then, Tucker appears behind her. He hands her a key and casually compliments her bravery for surfing alone so early. Zephyr simply smiles. After he drives away, she gets a message from Moses asking why she left so early. Zephyr lies and says it was to catch the morning waves. But moments later, Tucker returns. This time, he sneaks up and pulls a cover over Zephyr's face. She struggles, then goes limp as she loses consciousness. He carries her to his truck, drives to his boat, and locks her inside the cabin. A few hours later, Moses arrives at the beach looking for Zephyr. He scans the area but sees no sign of her. He tries calling her phone, only to hear it ringing from inside her van. Meanwhile, Zephyr slowly regains consciousness, only to find herself bound to a bed. A few feet away, on the other bed, Heather, pale and dazed, quietly tells her, "We're on his boat. There's no way out." Zephyr screams for help, but her voice is swallowed by the vast emptiness of the sea. Determined, she scans the room for anything that might help her pick the lock. Heather, eager to help, asks what she needs.
Something long and thin like a hairpin.
Know how to pick a lock?
Then Zephyr's gaze lands on the wall, where a name, belonging to a previous captive, is scratched into the surface. Sometime later, Zephyr asks Heather if anyone would be looking for her. Heather says no, then asks about Zephyr. She says no too. Meanwhile, Moses is on his way to work when he notices Zephyr's van being carried by a tow truck. Growing suspicious, Moses goes to the police station to file a missing person report. He tells the officer that Zephyr's van, her only home, was being towed, and insists that her disappearance feels out of character. The officer hesitates but eventually agrees to register the complaint. However, when asked for Zephyr's last name, Moses admits he doesn't know it, revealing that he had only known her for a single day.
11 hours in total, but it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality.
Back on the boat, Heather admits her mother disapproved of her taking a gap year. She had a clear plan for Heather: go straight to law school and eventually settle into a house not far from hers.
That sounds like her plan. It's your life.
Heather then asks why Zephyr came to Australia. Zephyr shares that she grew up in foster homes, and all she ever wanted was to escape. Curious, Heather asks if that's where Zephyr learned how to pick locks. From juvie.
The only thing I learned in juvie is sleep with one eye open and a shit ton of bad jokes.
Trying to lighten the mood, Heather asks Zephyr to tell a joke.
What do you call the useless piece of skin on a dick? What?
Heather bursts out laughing. Then Zephyr notices the underwire in Heather's bikini top and tells her to toss it. Just then, Tucker enters the room and offers Heather some bread. But Heather, clutching her blanket tightly, hesitates. Tucker finds this odd and offers her water. Heather reluctantly accepts.
Hey,
Zephyr
asshole.
yells at Tucker to bring her food too. He hands her bread and water, then sits down casually and starts talking about the scarlet kingsnake, a harmless species that mimics the coral snake's colorful stripes to trick predators. With a chilling smile, he warns her to stop pretending to be the coral snake, because in reality, he's the real one. He leaves the room. Zephyr tosses the bikini back to Heather and starts trying to pick the lock, but it turns out Tucker had drugged their water. Then she wakes up chained to a chair on the deck, while Tucker casually sets up a camera. With a glint in his eye, he tells Zephyr that many people believe God is above, but in truth, he's down there. He then mentions seeing her surfing at the beach, how alive she looked. "That's how I feel when I do this," he says. He walks over to the unconscious Heather and snips off a lock of her hair. Heather wakes up in a panic, hyperventilating. Zephyr pleads with Tucker to let her go, but he ignores her. Using a crane mechanism, he suspends Heather above the ocean. As both women scream, Tucker, calm and unaffected, says, "People think sharks love eating humans. That's a myth."
The thing about sharks is they don't actually enjoy eating people. When they do attack, it's unquestionably a case of mistaken identity. They throw charm overboard day after day so tourists can get their kicks, and pretty soon, sharks start to associate boats with food.
He lowers the suspender until Heather is submerged in the sea. Moments later, a shark devours her while Zephyr watches in helpless horror, tears streaming down her face. Back in the room, Zephyr begins scratching their names onto the wall. Then she notices something horrifying: layers of names hidden beneath the paint. Meanwhile, Tucker dances to music, sipping a drink. Then he carefully glues Heather's lock of hair onto a DVD cover and places it in a cupboard alongside others. He pulls out an empty cassette and writes Zephyr's name on the label. The next morning, Moses returns to the Snapper Rocks where Zephyr's van was last seen, unaware that just down the coast, Heather's body is floating in the water. He notices a broken surfboard on the shore and begins to fear that Zephyr may have drowned. Back on the boat, Tucker brings Zephyr some food.
Get away from me, you twisted fuck.
He tries to justify his actions, claiming that if sharks didn't exist, their prey would roam free without consequence. Sharks, he says, bring balance by removing the weak, just like he does.
Shark brings order.
Zephyr spits at him and retorts that sharks are far more evolved than he'll ever be. He walks away, mentioning that if she needs to relieve herself, there's a waste bucket nearby. Zephyr notices it and quietly breaks off the handle. That night, Tucker eats his dinner while watching footage of Heather being devoured by sharks. Afterward, he heads to the kitchen and prepares a syringe for Zephyr. When he returns to inject her, she uses the bucket handle to knock him out. She quickly grabs his keys and frees herself. But before she can escape, Tucker regains consciousness. He chases her down and injects the syringe into her leg. Despite the drug kicking in, she manages to reach the control room and tries the radio, only to discover there's no signal. Then she spots a party cruise ship in the distance and stumbles outside. As the drugs begin to take hold, Tucker appears. Thinking fast, Zephyr throws his beloved camera into the sea and jumps in after it. But Tucker drags her back to the boat. The next morning, a police chopper and boat scour the waters for Zephyr. As Moses watches the waves, he gets an idea. He opens the Wave Watch app, which shows live camera footage from different spots along the beach. He rewinds the footage to the time Zephyr went missing and sees a truck driving away from the spot where her van was last parked. When he zooms in, he notices a logo that says Tucker Experience and realizes this man might know what happened to Zephyr. He looks up the name online, finds the website, and calls the number. When no one picks up, he decides to go there in person. Meanwhile, Tucker drives into town to buy a new camera. On his way back, he's caught in traffic and sets his predatory sights on a lone tourist woman, deciding she'll be his next victim. Moses arrives at the dock and boards Tucker's boat. Hearing faint cries for help, he breaks a window and climbs inside. He finds Zephyr, her hands bound. She quickly tells him to find a paperclip or skewer and to call the police. Tucker returns moments later. A struggle breaks out between the two, with Moses briefly gaining the upper hand. But then Dave, mistaking Moses for an intruder, strikes him unconscious. As he begins to hear Zephyr's cries, Tucker knocks him out too. Tucker decides to head to Hangman's Shoals, intending to kill them both. Back in the room, Moses apologizes for ruining their escape. Zephyr reassures him that he nearly succeeded. When he asks why she really left that morning, she says she's better off alone. But Moses disagrees, insisting no one is better off alone.
You don't know me.
He tells her he does know about her, saying she probably holds the world record for eating the most bread rolls in a day, and that she's warm, funny, and full of life.
I sense that you haven't had as much kindness in your life as you deserve. That's why you ran.
Just then, Tucker enters the room and drugs them. Zephyr wakes up to find Moses attached to the suspender. She screams at Tucker that Moses isn't just another tourist and warns him that people will notice if he disappears. Tucker ignores her and raises Moses above the ocean, lowering him slowly into the water. Zephyr yells for him to stay still. Fortunately, the sharks don't react. Frustrated, Tucker stabs Moses to lure the sharks with his blood. As he lowers the suspender again, he suddenly notices a lifeguard chopper overhead and quickly brings both captives back inside. Zephyr begins dislocating her thumb in a desperate attempt to free herself from the chains. Tucker enters the room, calm and cold. He tells her that she and Moses were never meant to be, because Moses is soft and she's hard as nails just like him.
Nothing like you.
He compares them both to sharks, solitary creatures that prefer being alone. After he leaves the room, Zephyr begins biting down on her own thumb, desperate to break free. That night, Tucker prepares another syringe. But when he enters the room, he finds Zephyr's bed empty. She slips out and quickly shuts the door behind her, locking him in. Tucker manually forces open the emergency hatch, while a frantic Zephyr starts the boat, but Tucker cuts the power. She looks out the window and spots a party taking place on shore. Grabbing a flare to signal for help, she prepares to fire, but Tucker appears behind her, so she fires the flare at him instead and slams the door shut. Though injured, Tucker manages to break free again. Zephyr grabs a frying pan, hits him hard, and runs. Tucker climbs onto the deck and sees Zephyr swimming toward the shore. He jumps into a speedboat and chases her down, eventually catching her. Then he secures Moses to a chair while suspending Zephyr in midair. He throws water at her to wake her up. Then he asks them if they know why marlin is the fisherman's fish of choice. When neither responds, he explains. Marlins fight when they get caught, and fishermen love the challenge. But the marlin doesn't know that once the hook sets in, it's game over. For the fisherman, it's all just entertainment. He lowers Zephyr into the sea and begins recording. But the sharks don't approach her. Frustrated, Tucker uses a hook to guide them toward her. One shark grabs the hook and swims off, yanking Tucker slightly. Zephyr grabs hold of the hook and tries to pull herself back up, but Tucker startles her, and she loses grip, falling into the water. As she swims, she spots the same shark Tucker had previously injured with the hook. Covering her wounded hand, she stares at the creature. After a brief moment of eye contact, the shark turns away and leaves her alone. Zephyr climbs back onto the boat, grabs a harpoon gun, and shoots Tucker, sending him into the water where he becomes prey to the sharks. She then fires the emergency flare, signaling the nearby party boat for help. Finally, she rushes to Moses, who has lost a significant amount of blood, and urges him to hold on.
Moses, hey, I want to tell you something. When I said there's nothing for me on land, there's you, okay?
I knew it.